I'm gonna begin. Uh, uh, Today's date is November 2nd, 2022. My name is Susan Kahlo, and I am sitting here. We're having a follow-up interview with Sherman Neal, and thank you for taking the time to come back over here and do this, because I've got to wrap up your story that I'll be submitting to the Library of Congress with your records. So, and we are in Atlanta, Georgia. And so if you wouldn't mind, Sherman, if you would just begin, give your name again, spell your name, and give the branch of service you're in and your rank.
Okay, appreciate it. And name's Sherman Neal, Sherman Neal, the second. I am a Marine and ended up leaving as a captain.
Okay, and what year did you go in? Let's start with your...
So I went to OCS in 2009 and commissioned in April 2010, and I EAS'd or ended service in March of 2019, so about 9.5 years.
Okay, okay. Well, to get kind of because we talked about how we covered before a little bit about your background and getting into law school and what you did beforehand, but so what was happening when you got your first assignment, or where were you physically assigned, geographically?
Yep, so leaving law school, so at that point in time I opted out of practicing law in favor of going to ground contract, and so what happened then is that triggers a date to go to the basic school, or TBS, which is located in Quantico, Virginia. And it's a 6-month school, and it's a basic platoon commander school that all Marine officers have to go to. It was a unique time for me because this is 2013, 14, and there's a huge backlog. So where most people go within a couple months at the most, I ended up having a delay period for like about 6, 7, almost 8 months before I can go.
What caused a backlog? What?
The combination of drawdown at the time.
Oh, okay.
The Marines, and just had too many officers in the pipeline to go through. Okay. And so I graduated law school in May, and I didn't go report until February. I want to say the next February. I was expecting to go in August. So I had not had enough money to live that long. I didn't have a job, and so what happened was my girlfriend at the time had moved to Atlanta, and I came down actually, and I lived with her, and I just trained. And so I was training, anticipating going in September. That didn't happen. Training, anticipating going in December. That didn't happen. Then took all the way to February. So a lot of time with me on couch trying to find jobs and not being able to get them. That's a whole nother story. But taught myself how to swim and just do things that would lead to success, hopefully at TBS. Eventually, February, I did make my way to Quantico. I think within the first week. So at that point in time, I hadn't been active duty in the Marines or anything with the Marines for 4 years. And so there's some acclimatization that needed to occur. And I remember the first memory I had was like the first week. I got a letter, a reprimand, because I had white socks on, and which is a no-no. It meant that the first evaluations we had, I was the bottom of my squad, because that was enough to be there, because nobody else did anything wrong. And it kind of strange that was that memory, but it was cool because it was not that part, but you live in a barracks together with your company. I lived in Mannion Hall, which is named after Travis Mannion, who was a Marine who had been killed in Iraq. But he I should say I proposed to that girlfriend at this point in time is Beyonce, but
So where was she staying while you were in the barracks?
Yeah, so she was in Georgia. So she had started grad school at Mercer, and working in Georgia, because knowing that was only going to be 6 months, there was any point in going up there and doing that yet, at least in my logic. But so the so basic school being a platoon commander school, so you have your company, and then on your floor you really have like your squad, and that becomes like your platoon, and then like your squad of people that you really get close to, and then you have your roommate. It's a shared room. Mine was a guy named Stuart Disnowski, a Texan. He was as stereotypical Texan as it gets. He was a prior enlisted Marine, so he was the opposite of me. He had experience. Kind of knew he was able to survive off Shiner Buck and watching Rangers games and still like out PT like anybody else. Whereas I was confused and needed help half the time. But it was cool, and so we lived together. The ended up getting pretty close with squad. You don't really have a choice. It's the purpose of basic school is really to rank you and then to assign you to a career occupational specialty. So I always found myself either somewhere at the top of ranking or somewhere at the bottom. They're similar to OCS, and there's a variety of reasons for that. A lot of military skill stuff I just struggled with initially, but made it through. But of the things that I guess with TBS, there's a heavy academic. So it's intense from the academic and a physical standpoint. I didn't have any issues really with the physical part of it. I was pretty healthy coming in, and then academic standpoint, I did pretty well. It was the military skills, specifically with land nav. So for land navigation, they send you off in the woods. You got to find like a shoebox size object somewhere off in the distance. And I was pretty terrible at it throughout, and it complicated life for like two reasons. One, anytime you failed land nav, you had to remediate on Saturday mornings. And so my motivation to not fail would be the fact that Ricky at the time would be flying in on Saturday.
Oh, okay.
And that I would every Saturday I'd have to call and say I can't pick you up from the airport. I failed, and that sucked and took away limited time that I had. The other was as it got towards the end, they don't just let you fail and then not graduate. So it took me from the entirety of the company. It whittled down to about me and like three other people. That had one last chance, like the week before graduation, to find these boxes in the woods. Which, from an anxiety standpoint, it's tough. It got to the point where like I called my mom and I told her like don't come, because I think she's the only one that came to my graduation. But I told her don't come because failure is imminent and I'm gonna be stuck here. So, by act of God, I ended up passing that time.
You
like
found
most
the
things,
box?
and found that box. Before I'm skipping over probably the other traumatic event that happened. So on Labor Day, so my brother's in the Air Force at the time. He was training in Panama City, and
What was his name?
Denzel
Okay.
Neal. So he's still in now, and I planned to meet with him in Atlanta at Ricky's house on Labor Day, and we did, and to go to a West Virginia Alabama football game. I know this is gonna tie to military quickly, but the that Friday we met up. We went out. We're in Buckhead, and it's just part of Atlanta, and to knock on this whole adventure, a car pulled up next to Ricky and her friends, and this guy said, who knows what to him. I end up walking past the car. The guy jumps out of the car. He jumps me with a buddy. He leaves his car and drive. I don't know this at the time because I'm on the ground. It ends up like crash. He is highly intoxicated. Who knows why? But me, my brother, and him, we're in an altercation. Police come.
Oh gosh.
And police handcuff me, my brother, and these two guys. The guy that jumped out of the car, he ended up having to get tased. Like, but he's on something. So they take us all to jail. So for me, there's many problems with this. I'm imminently about to graduate, and it's not a fun phone call to make. So that I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd got affidavits. I'd been like lawyer mode, and so I that Saturday morning Vicky picked us up from jail, and I called my platoon commander at the time and said, "Sir, no, this is gonna sound crazy. I didn't do anything at all, but like, just have to let you know, I was in jail. It'll be taken care of by the time I got back from as far as like stories and getting everything together." And he's like, roger that. I'm sure it wasn't his first phone call ever from a Marine in jail. So I was like, man, I think your life is over. So what happens with that, and where kind of get to see some of the difference in culture with Marines and Air Force, is that Monday I had put together statements, affidavits, talked to the Atlanta City prosecutor, and given all that information to the then commanding officer of the basic school overall. I think it was Colonel DeGrossier at the time. And at no point in time did they question whether I was lying or did anything or anything like that. In fact, he may have alluded to I would have did some of the same, even though I wish I could say I wanted to fight. I didn't even get to fight. But what happened at that point is a mandatory report to the commanding general of Education Command, and they put me on a hold from going to my next unit. So where for my brother, he had to go back to the Air Force, and he had the opposite reaction as far as like they reprimanded him. They forced him to essentially make a decision on taking a deferred punishment or something like that. For me, it disorderly conduct, misdemeanor. I could have did a couple hours of community service, wrote it off. But it's one of the times, like, it's gonna sound like corny and stuff, but I keep Constitution in my pocket. And so I was like, why am I doing this if I did nothing wrong? And everything I'm doing is pointless. And I'm an attorney, and so I'm going to go to court over this. And so in order to do that, I knew I'd have to take an administrative hold. And so in the interim at that time, I had got assigned as a logistics officer. It wasn't quite the plan. I was planning on going infantry, but I had got orders to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and Twentynine Palms, which I didn't know was a place that existed at the time. And so those were all put on hold. So I ended up going to court. In the interim while I'm on hold, there's this old barracks called like Graves Hall where they put all the injured Marines or the officers in infantry officer school course, which was aggravating because I wasn't one of them. But I had to stay there for like 2 months, and literally all I do is just like read books and like case law and work out in the woods in Virginia. And long story short, ended up going to court, ended up winning. So my first criminal trial was for myself. I had to cross-examine my fiance at the time and her friends, which was interesting. But made it through that ordeal, graduated, got out, then ended up getting a date for logistics officers course, which is in Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. So moved to North Carolina, and during that course, it's basically it's just throwing a book of anything they can for, like, you can't really teach anybody to be a logistics officer. I recognize that now. It's just kind of like learned by experience or on the job training. But the key thing that happened is my orders to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines got taken back, and they assigned me to 7th Marines. And so I think when I found that out, I was like, hey, I don't know the difference, to be honest, but it's still an infantry unit. And I get a phone call from the logistics officer, the regimental logistics officer from 7th Marines, saying like, hey, happy to have you here. No, you got any plans for? So this is February. The course ends in April. He's like, can you tell me, a bit about your life? Any plans? What do you want to know about the unit? And told him, like, I don't know what I said, but I know I did tell him that I was getting married in the summer in June, and he's like, well, the regiment's deploying in April or March, and obviously that's problematic.
Wow.
And so at that point in time, had I said anything I probably could have had a choice to stay back because the regiment leaves people when they deploy. So about half of the unit stays back. He specifically called to ask me, did I want to go? My thought process is, if you say no to deploy with an infantry unit, then you're probably not ever going to go there, and that's just not what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what I'd be doing, but so I said yes, and ended up hanging off that phone call, having to make one of many phone calls I'd have to make in life, but like, hey, like, his plans kind of changed.
To your fiance.
Yeah, to my fiance, and saying, would you prefer to get married after or earlier? And we had already technically been married at the courthouse because like on January 2nd, we had woke up after New Year's Day and decided to go do it. But but for like the ceremony part, and so she decided she wanted to do it earlier. So ended up graduating from the logistics course and got married on March 20th. And I know the date because we were supposed to leave. I had 5 days to get back to leave from North Carolina to San Diego. So at the time, I'd never even been to where the unit was at in 29 Palms or San Diego. So I had to immediately move there. So got married in Dunwoody, in Georgia. It was great. She came to San Diego with me for like 4 days. It doesn't count as a honeymoon, believe me. I know it doesn't. So it was always on the back burner. We're gonna go on one. It's still a TBD right now. So, but so went, said bye after 4 days of being married. Ended up checking in to the unit, realizing I'm in a lot of trouble because I have no idea like what I'm supposed to be doing yet. I'm joining them as they're getting ready to go, and being a captain and like older, higher ranking Marine, but with no experience because I switched from law. There are a lot of expectations with no reason for being able to do it. But either way, leave from San Diego to not San Diego, but Oceanside. So actually I hadn't been to 29 Palms yet. So the unit that we're deploying out of actually organized themselves in Oceanside. And so I hadn't even lived in 29 Palms, although that was my duty station, and went straight to Kuwait essentially. And from there, my duties were I was a maintenance management officer for the regiment, which generally means that every piece of equipment that belongs to the Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force, which is what the unit that we're comprised of, I had purview over the status of that, to repair the total life cycle of all the equipment. The task force is combined of one. There's the air wing. For us, this was there's C-130s and the Ospreys, the MV-22s. They largely do their own thing. The regiment has their various attachments. There's probably about 200 people that deploy with the regiment. And then you also support a battalion of about 900 people. That battalion, who was the battalion that? I want to say it was 3-7, which is ironic again. so it's 3-7, and that came up. So how did significant events, I guess, over the course of the deployment? The way I usually explain people, like, time of service for me is like I commissioned under Bush, deployed once under Obama, then the third time was under Trump. So this time is Obama, and this is a bit where we're initially going to be drawing out of Iraq. And so that was the mission going in. So really, for my primary duties, it was accountability of equipment that had been, throughout the battle space, getting that equipment to a position where we either knew we were leaving there or knew that we were going to send back to the United States, and then right-sizing for whatever the force would look like there.
So you're physically in Kuwait, so that's
Correct.
like the command center.
Yeah.
But then you're drawing down on Iraq.
Yes, primarily.
So you're getting messages.
Well, let me peel it back.
It?
I'm conflating the two deployments. So we're not. I jumped to deployment number 2 a bit. So the reason that the special purpose, the SP MAGTF is the name, existed is because of Benghazi. So the reason that the unit was put together in aggregate was to provide a crisis response force in the Middle East. Okay. What became part of the mission was accountability of other items that belong to Marines or whoever, assets there. And this is all running from Kuwait at the time.
Okay.
And the reason that I kind of jumped forward is because while that was the assigned mission, which was really having a ready force of a company to, say, Benghazi, having to fly them in on a tether. They also had Marines at the embassy in Iraq. What the mission became over time was not drawing back equipment. It was, this group called ISIS started becoming a word and thing. And so as soon as we got the equipment, the new mission was turn that equipment right back around and insert it into different military bases in Iraq that hadn't previously been occupied for years in some cases. And for the Marines, this is the first time, inserting into hostile situation in a while at that scale. So a good example would be Al-Taqadum Air Base in Iraq. We would receive orders to take a company of Marines to put them at Al-Taqadum TQ to advise and assist the Iraqi army in their fight against ISIS at the time. And what that would require is a company's worth of equipment, whether that's trucks, weapons, ammunition, fuel, food, all of that, to get inserted under cover of darkness in like one day into an air base that nobody's really been at in a while. I'm sure, I'm not crazy, I'm sure that they sent some Green Berets or SEALs or something to at least check to make sure it's good to go, but there wasn't too much indication of that. So from my panic standpoint, shouldn't say panic, but it is what it is, high anxiety standpoint is, having not done that myself, the timelines that you have to meet, and the requirements and everything that has to get there. And so when we talk about details, if there's like a PFCX at the time has a girl in the barracks, or not, he has a girl out in town and she has a credit card, she's staying out in his hotel, he shouldn't be doing that, it's getting blown. It's like, okay, that I can reasonably, hopefully lead my way out of that. You talk to him, as you're having conversation, you hear about her going back to school, and I'm like, all right, so is he talking to some girl at UCLA? No, it's a 16-year-old sophomore, in high school, and you're now on the phone with this girl's
These
sister.
are examples of types of things you had to handle as a platoon. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so me and the master sergeant, who was Allison at the time, it's me, him, I'm on the phone with this girl's sister and the Marine trying to decide best course, and the girl's in the hotel room. And so what is best course of action here? Can you send a 16-year-old back to myself? Can you send Marines with her? Should you do that? Call the police immediately? What does that do? So he ended up going through, I think he got charged with statutory rape and some other stuff. But the entire time that's going on, you're responsible for everything they do, fail to do, being evaluated. Now there's just a ton of things that you can't prepare for, and that you definitely at 25 probably at the time don't know you're going to be engaged in. You got the staff sergeants who are beating their wives. So people are doing great things. You get to promote. And I don't want to harp on all the negative, but high stress, and then you go
high lows.
Yeah, and then you drive to Vegas, and can you unload that there?
Yeah. Would you get off? Like when you said would you get off? Could you count on getting off at a certain time, or again, if you had a issue, you had to be prepared for a delay in driving of 3 hours to Vegas? Is that kind of how it went?
Typically, typically count on it, but it's mission based. So I had outstanding Marines, particularly like a dispatcher. Was I think he left as Sergeant Edgy. I think he's a police officer in Savannah now, but he or Brunswick. But I can trust like the Marines I worked with, and I tried to always give as much as I could from leeway standpoint. But there would be times where, you know, it's 5 o'clock, so I ain't gonna lie. You try to leave before 5 o'clock, given the drive across the desert to not hit Vegas traffic. But, you know, what happens if, you know, a Marine loses a piece of equipment that you know that nobody's gonna know the accountability is missing for it, but yourself and that Marine. But, you know, and it's Friday. Do you keep all of them there until we find it? So you're mad, they're mad, and but it's the right thing to do. So there's a lot of opportunities to do things without integrity, I'll say, or, you know, there's no reason most of the time for me to be in the field with them, with how the operations were going. But how do you build that in? How do you stay for the free weekend that you have? And yeah, so there's a lot of that. And so this is the platoon commander phase of it, and also. And then, like I said, you're driving now. Then when you go home, you know it's don't be in Vegas. This whole time I'm sleeping on the cot in like my office for during the week. Either way too. So intentionally, I could have probably got an apartment room, but I never wanted to feel like it was home, because then I'll be tempted when I'm tired to stay, and I was tired all the time, and so I go to Vegas and. Even that whole period's blurred time, but it's I wasn't really there. Like there's in two different worlds. I see she has stressors from being pregnant with first kid, and where things so
she was still pregnant. When did she have the baby?
She had the baby in July. I want to say July 10th, and I guess it's kind of the second phase of being with. So I ended up. In addition to having the platoon commander duties, Colonel Godfrey left, who was in charge of the regiment, and I became the regiment logistics officer, which is, for a captain to do that period, it's pretty unprecedented. Most of the time, you have someone who has 3. Major Godfrey had been deployed like 6 times before that. So, and then on top of that, I still don't have experience for the most part. So with accepting that role, I'm now in charge of directly supporting all logistics for the battalions in the field, and working with battalion logistics officers who are captains usually that have had at least 8 years of experience. So for me, it's transparency time. Like, hey, you guys, like, I realize, you know, I'm here to help. You know, there's no dumb question. I'm doing everything I can. And so, like, it was extremely difficult, because it was very short staff, and we're between commanders as well. And
was it sort of a vote of confidence though on his part that he gave you that responsibility? Was above, you say it's above your, kind of above your experience. He pushed you. Yeah. But he did it because he thought you could handle it, you think, or because they were just shorthanded and there was nobody else to do it?
He did it because he thought I could handle it. And
it's on-the-job learning. You already said that's the only way you can learn.
Yeah. And we ended up, the new commander who came in as a Colonel Vivian, who I've worked with to this day, and he's, like, again, I luckily, like, it's easy to harp on the negative because a lot of it came. But again, a very stoic, patient, experienced like leader. Like he doesn't have to cuss. He can make you. You don't want to make him disappointed. You want to. The first time that we met, actually, this is probably just me being an idiot. Like he brought the officers over to his house, and I think he was standing on like the truck bed of his car, and he like introduced himself, and I don't know why out of my mouth after he got done talking, probably because I had some before. I said, where's the whiskey at or something? And he brought me into the house and we sat down. We had like a glass of whiskey together and just talked. Which is crazy, like idiot in retrospect, but he's just an awesome person. And then and then I got a new Master Sergeant named Master Sergeant Floyd, and he is a probably like 6'5", from Eastern Oregon, big like white dude, pretty tons of experience in combat roles outside. He's an encyclopedia when it comes to things. But the first thing that we talked about, like, he came into my office and sat down on the couch, like kicked his legs up. I don't know who the hell this dude is, and introduced himself. And first question he says, it wasn't really a question, it was a statement. He says, "You voted for Hillary, didn't you?" And I was like,
What?
And I'm like, okay. And the answer is yes and either here. This is clearly not a man that was interested in voting for Hillary Clinton, and so that became for the next like year of just every day diametrically opposed discussion, but hearts like
in a good way.
Yes, a good human
Respectfully.
being. Yeah, and not afraid to tell me if I'm being a jackass, I'll get it back to him soon sometimes. But like his intent is to protect me half the time. Like anything that we talked, I knew that he had my back with the Marines, and he knew that from a stressor standpoint we were managing, and so that set conditions for future discussions I had to have like that in my life. But it was just an awesome person. But from a work standpoint, that's the first time. So the reason I knew about Jet and him being born, so there's a service level exercise, which is like it's basically a mock deployment. You go out into the training area for a month and do everything that you would do on deployment to certify yourself as ready to go. And it was from a logistic. You got units coming in from the East Coast. You got some coming from San Diego. You're bringing everybody together as a regiment logistics officer. Again, you're now responsible for making all of that happen, and that extremely stressful. And the exercise started. I believe it was either July 11th. I believe it was July 11th. Yes, it was July 11th because that was Monday. July 10th was a Sunday. So this is the day before the exercise. I'm watching football, and Ricky comes downstairs and says, "It's time to have a baby."
So you were back in Vegas with her.
I'm in Vegas,
okay.
knowing that I'm going to have to leave for a month.
I gotcha.
So like, but knowing that there's a lot of things to do on Monday, we're in the hospital, and Jet's born, again, like now I can think with clarity. At the time, like I was in the fog in the first place because now I'm in the conflict of what do I do, like a couple like thousands of Marines.
But back up. So tell me though, when he was born, were you elated, or how was that? Were you there at the hospital, or?
I was.
At that moment,
I got to physically be there, see him get born. It was cool. So when he was born, so Ricky had a rough pregnancy.
Oh, that's too bad.
And so she was she had to get things fixed. I'm taking care of Jet initial first time, so I was the first one to feed him. Now I fed him. I didn't know what this word was at the time, but he aspirated.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so I didn't know that means liquid goes in the lungs, and so when he aspirated, that then became infection. Infection has led to pneumonia, has led to hypertension, has led to him being in the NICU for about a month and a half.
Oh dear, I'm sorry.
So,
wow.
Yeah,
that can happen though.
So I'm thinking I've almost killed my son. First Ricky's in bad shape, and I just don't know what to do. They take him to the NICU. I called. I don't even know who I called. I don't know if I called him direct, but told Colonel Vivian hey, I don't think I can come back. He's like, why the hell are you calling me? Of course. And so it says a lot about what I was thinking about. And so just pretty sick, like ventilator, like bad. Ricky ends up coming out of it. We ended up stayed for, I want to say like 3 days, and then I thought there was a stabilization period, and I went back to just to check on some things and talked to Colonel Vivian about staying, and then I came back to Vegas, and one of the days he ended up having to get ramped back up, and Ricky, they shut down the NICU for like an hour if your kid's in there, so we went home, or else parents will stay there forever. There's the NICU, gives you perspective in life, like he's sick, but you see babies that big, the parents have been there for months, but we went home, and Ricky sits on the couch and she starts crying, and I'm like, it'll be okay, and she's like, we'll be right back, and she's like, it's not that. She lifts up her foot, and there's a scorpion hanging off of it.
No.
So literally, yeah. So I don't know that word other than like, what the fuck. So I get the scorpion, which is alive, off a foot, put it into a bag. I'm trying to Google, like, is this something that can kill you type? She's like in space at this point in time. So we go back to the hospital. She goes into the ER. She's at the bottom. They take her in the room. I go check on Jet. He's, on ventilator upstairs. And I then went to at this point in time, like there's been a few times in life I'm just giving up. I went to the gas station, I think I went to the liquor store, and got myself something to drink. Got a cup, and just started making rotations at that point in time between the two floors, and while the exercise is going on, and just it was intense. The good news, she ended up being okay. Jet ended up being okay, and get another decision point. Once he did stabilize, I decided to go back again. Retrospect, probably wouldn't have did it, but
What would have been if you didn't go back? What would have been your choice?
to just stay and hope that
How long
Marines,
did you? Yeah.
I didn't know, and I knew that they were hurt. There's a lot of centralized information, and so went back once they got out, and mentally there's no telling. It was tough, but they all ended up okay. But ended up finishing the exercise successfully. I can't remember too many disasters. Can't remember too much at the time. But and at that point in time, I think I'd been at 2 years or so with the unit, so I didn't know what my next move was gonna be, because the regiment was gonna deploy again, and I wasn't gonna go with them, and I didn't want to be with the remain behind, because usually that sucks, because all the Marines that get left behind are there for a reason, and you still have to support battalions, and now I'd have to do it myself without the same level of leadership that we had. And luckily the executive officer who was in charge of me that came in was the third of three straight of awesome human beings who had to walk me through some future problems, which I'll get to in a second. But the next thing that happened is I thought I had some time to relax. I could have went to an easier unit, potentially, like said, sir, I'm tired. Son went through this. Went through this. Can I go to San Diego? Can I go to an air unit? Can I just get out of this period? And never had that conversation. And not because it doesn't matter. The Marines are going to do what they want to do with you. And I remember going to a brief. So 2-7 had just came back, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines from deployment, and they were doing a transition brief. And one of the slides on it talked about their new leadership. And I remember looking, and I saw my name on there. I was like, is there another Captain Neal coming in? Or what's going on here? And Colonel Godfrey at the time had been grooming me to be battalion logistics officer, and I'd proven self, I would say, and Hush is a reward, but if I thought I had done anything hard to date, it wasn't being close, and so I've transitioned straight from Regiment 4 to being 27's S4. S4 is the term for logistics officer, and they had just got back from deployment. One of their new commanding officer was previously working with one of the battalions that we were supporting, so we had a relationship, and so he knew. It's rare that, but he knew who I was coming in, and we had a good relationship, and I knew he is different, let's say, when he is with 3-4, because my buddy who I deployed with, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. My buddy who I deployed with to Kuwait the first time ended up going to work for him as his assistant logistics officer. So I would come home from night from the regiment thing, and I'm hurt and tired and I'm bitching, and he would be like, "You have no idea, like this there's a crazy man here," and I'd see him every day. I'm like, "Man, that sucks for you." Well, lo and behold,
Then you end up.
Then I end up being his logistics officer, and he's very smart. He's very detailed. He's one of the people. He doesn't just do like the give you a one slide thing. He's gonna read everything, and so. 27's previous commander was like beloved by Battalion, so I get it. The first week I'm there, they have an offsite, and we just go to the officers club. And what I realized at this point is the battalion is pretty much in a mutiny against like the new CO, and I'm the new guy too, but I'm affiliated with him. So like,
What is his name?
Colonel Kenny, Colonel JQ Kenny, and yeah, no, I'm going. Well, I'm sorry. So I'll skip. So
So yeah, because you have
no, I'm
to
good.
pick up kids.
No, I'm good till I think first basketball practice is they actually. But so when I say mutiny, like they are. He's done things. He's changed the dress code to like where you have to wear like khakis and button up polo, like things that can do should like. All kinds of small things he did, and they were irritated about it. The executive officer at the time now, Colonel Kerrigan, then Major Kerrigan was again an outstanding. He was like what every Marine would want in a leader. The operations officer, not Colonel Flambert, but Major Flambert. He was like your commercial Marine on the commercial, 6'3", like 225 dude. Like charisma through when there's like the stereotypical like Marine on leave who is a danger in towns, especially like Vegas for members of the opposite sex or something, it's him. And like he had me going, I'll do anything, both of them. But so it's difficult because they're the opposite of the colonel, and they're both going to be on their third deployments with 27 as well. And so there's credibilities within the Marines, it can't be touched. So so that's kind of the mood going in. Not great.
So you were being deployed again?
We are going to be, yeah.
Okay.
And so
what year was this?
This would be 2017. I want to say this is like January 2017, and January 2017, and I believe so. It's either 17 or 18, but for me, the leadership challenge for me is that this is going to be my first time really having other officers that I'm leading. And so with being in charge of the section, it's usually split into maintenance management, supply, motor transportation, and then your assistant logistics officer. And with the four, so I was going to be in charge of 4 lieutenants. And I'd worked with some of them before, just through doing some support stuff, but it was unique because they all had more experience than I did. So that was day one. The two things that one thing I've taken from football is, there's no like, hey, when you turn on film on Sunday afternoon, they don't take you in another private room and be like, all right, this is why you need to correct it. It's whole room there. why did you suck this much for good to look? And it's not just to embarrass you, so everybody sees, everybody's hearing the same language, everybody can't say like I didn't feel it. So that's what from the beginning, I was like, I need to gain all the knowledge I can from y'all, like collectively, and I need to make sure I'm applying things fairly based on what you've seen. So we're all going to evaluate everything in this together. Like I'm captain, sir, but I am working with you. So you don't work for me, and did that, and so trying to establish rapport. So within probably a week, probably most significant life thing comes up is one of the lieutenants actually was at the regiment with me. He got brought over as well. He was the supply officer named Lieutenant Harris. And he, amongst other things, he is, so he gets brought over. Supply is the worst job. Like my job kind of sucks. The communications officer job kind of sucks. Supply is just all the time just bad. in infantry units because that's not what they're oriented towards. And so he's taking over an account. When I say account, he's taking over all the equipment and accountability from another unit, and he struggling a bit. He's new, just like I am. And Colonel Kenny asked me, should he replace Lieutenant Harris? And I said, no, there's nothing to justify doing that. And thought that was, conversation in passing. I appreciated asking for my input because he can do whatever he wants. Lo and behold, like about a week after that, so I'm going in his office. I'm giving him his reports, daily, and he's typing information, putting things together. And about a week later, the executive officer, Major Kerrigan, he brings me in his office. He shows me an email from Colonel Kenny to the chief of staff of the division, so big time, saying that basically the accounts disaster, accountability is bad, all these things, blah blah blah. Lieutenant Harris. Now the language of that email was a direct lift from emails that I had sent him. Just the context of like, hey, this is wrong because 17 did this historically. This is the account. Just took the bad and just put essentially Lieutenant Harris for recommend replacement. And I knew that is because I had the email myself as verbatim.
Kind of manipulated your emails.
So at that point in time, there's the XO who's my reporting senior knows this. The reason he brought me in because he knew I wouldn't do. He asked I wouldn't do that in that way, and I know that these 4 lieutenants who I'm just working for now, there's no. If I don't do anything, they can never trust me. Should never trust me, and 2, it's just wrong. Like I was misled at best, and so Lieutenant Harris gets removed from the battalion. It's also compounded by the fact that in most battalions there's about 900 Marines, maybe 80 to 100 officers. Lieutenant Harris is the only other black officer in the battalion. Oh. So not only was he working for so that's not great either. I personally don't think that it is racially motivated, but Lieutenant Harris does. So he files an equal opportunity complaint on his own. There's this procedure called request masked. This is where you write a complaint that goes up chain until I can get to the commandant. And I knew I had to do something, and I knew that by doing something, either way, I was either going to stay in the unit and fail because there's no trust, or I was going to, unfortunately, have to request removal. I didn't propose a solution, but you would think if you lost trust and confidence in the officers, you can be removed if you're the command officer, and I was essentially going to have to.
So you were losing trust and confidence in Kenny?
Yeah, so mine was. So I went to his office. I said, "Sir, this email's come to my attention. Here's the email that I sent you. before this exact information, the context applied. Here's this email recommending that resulted in his termination. No, do you know how the chief of staff of the division acquired this information verbatim without the proper context? And he said he didn't know. And I told him, like, sir, like, you are you sure?
Because he wrote it.
Yeah, well, he did, but the actual author was the chief. So like he.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so well, if that's the case, then in order to stay here, the Marines have to know that I would not throw them under the bus, whatever type term, and I'm going to have to ask, via request mass for an investigation of this, because I knew that he had did it. So I ended up starting that process. Eventually, which I see as just walking yourself to the gallows, essentially. It's, Yeah. So.
But you felt it was the right thing to do.
I did, and I'm still working hard like this entire time, and attempting to go home with kids and not think about it. But so when I did that, what triggered is about a month and a half long process where they end up interviewing all the officers in the battalion, deposing people essentially, and getting together a pretty lengthy investigation. And it went to the executive officer at the regiment who I'd worked for before. So he had known me character-wise. I ended up going to the commanding officer of the regiment who worked for before. He had known me, and then it went to the commanding general of the division. When it got to the commanding general, throughout this time, Colonel Kenny would bring me into his office and talk to me for hours at a time about thoughts, process, why, and doing these things. And it took until the very last step where he told me that he lied and that he did it. And it was the explanation that the term he used was like, sometimes you just gotta be like a company man, I think, which is the antithesis of everything that I am. But either way, that was bad. And everybody knows 127 is just known for craziness anyway. We had already been under investigation for hazing things and stuff, but so that was not great. And when I say like mentally where I was at is I went home. I couldn't sleep. Like I couldn't think. I wasn't eating, and it was just I didn't know how to communicate it with Ricky like at all. She also has a kid by herself and still in recovery and still is dealing with the not only the trauma but still the real follow-on care required from the NICU. Like so I'm
she's on her own.
Yeah. So and I'm and I don't know. I'm in not good shape. Sleeping in the office still. So like either way, that happened. But what made it worse is the division response was I don't know, make up the language, but it was basically dismissive of everything any concerns that any of us had shared. So basically, as the command, you need to suck it the fuck up.
In other words, they let it slide. I mean, it stood.
Yeah.
Harrison was removed.
Yeah, Harrison removed. It stood. They brought in his preferred candidate, his Captain Tanner McNamara. He worked for me technically, and the other lieutenants didn't like him. So it's trying to do the work aside. There's managing that. Now, ironically, Tanner became like my best friend. It's just like weird. Like so, one of like it's a lot of, but either way, but yeah. So there's that. End up going into deployment. Well, I'm sorry. So that was, I would say, the investigation phase, and it was like okay, like we have to get ready to go phase in deploying. So when I say like the difference between battalion and really anywhere else is, you know, when you sign up for the Marines after seeing the commercial and such, you're thinking about what happens in the desert, the jungle, wherever you're going. Whereas, you know, the hard thing that you can't really grasp or know is the training and you know, of the time that you're at home, you are in the field 70%. If you have certain type of commanders, you're going to try to find a way every day for somebody to be in, and it's continuous. And it's and I hadn't had an appreciation for that until there was no just like go home on the weekends, or like there was no hours, like I'm there most of the time. So even at best I was going home 2 weekends a month, and of those weekends, you know, he was the type of person who was calling you on Saturday to text you, so XYZ, and yeah, so there's a lot going on with that. And as you can imagine, mental health has degraded morale for the battalion overall, so all the human factors are coming into that as well. But so as we get near, we well, one, Vicky's pregnant shortly.
For number 2.
Yeah, number
Okay.
2. And timing wise, you know, Skylar was at the time was going to be born in October. Now we deploy in October, so that's realized that information. So again, presented with a couple of choices. So we go through another ITX, which is again a month long. Another month long exercise there. With the battalion, there's several other exercises you have to do to certify, varying from 10 days to 2 weeks where you're in the field. On the battalion staff now, I have to do like pre-deployment surveys. So I spent a week in the Middle East prior to going. There's just a lot of other obligations, and not only are you internally trying to fix things, but you're also getting externally inspected, which is all the time if you're a logistics unit, which is the most aggravating part of the whole job, because it's just people that come in and tell you suck. CO, unfortunately in this case, I have people saying that you suck. So like you just have a circle of bad. And so my what I saw as my primary duties shifted more away from execution, and just sit in as many, shield any of this from any of the Marines, and don't even bring them close if I can, and whether it's attending all the meetings and all the trouble, whatever it takes. And it was just a lot of negativity going around. But the
If I can I don't want to interrupt you, but just to ask, and even maybe reflecting back on it, is that part of the training of your responsibility in that role?
Yes.
In other words, it was you knew you were getting on the job training, but that realm, that level of responsibility for everything that happens and protecting your Marines.
Yes.
In other words, you were the shield.
Yes.
To make sure things stayed right for them. That's part of your leadership training.
It was the leader, and I got it from Majors Kerrigan and Flambert. Flambert being the operations officer, like they treated me like I try to treat they included me in planning. If you're a battalion operations officer, you can easily come up with good ideas that could end up screwing me over as the logistics officer with everything else, and it was very, very inclusive. Obviously, they made the decision, but I got that from them, and I would see them absorbing a lot for me.
That's what it sounds like from what you were saying, that they were grooming you by setting an example of how you lead, and you in turn you were learning it, but that's what they expected of you, to make a good leader.
Yeah.
But the fact is, that isn't something you can't look at your watch and turn off at a certain time.
Yes, and so that I would say that there's direct spillover into home life, because I never discussed any of this for the most part, or it'd be I didn't know how to to physically see her working, like she's waking up at 5. I said get him to daycare in Vegas, then go to work, then off, and so I just didn't know how. I didn't think it was the right thing to do,
Protecting
so,
you, you were doing the same thing. You're protecting somebody that you care about.
But unless you, having been groomed in that is knowing that's protection versus distancing, I would say. Most of society, like, so protection for us is, hey, let's all go to the O Club and just, if we happen to drink until we have to stumble back to the office and we just wake up on the floor and go like right back to work. Some workplaces would probably be like, you guys have some significant emotional distress issues tied to like substances. Some places would call that camaraderie and like, unit, building cohesion. And so, I wish I could tell you I knew.
Were there many other, how many of your fellow Marines were married?
One of the
percentage would you say? Not so much how many?
Yeah, roughly of the enlisted, almost staffing up, it's almost all of them, except for I'm forgetting his name, Gunny Zia Jacob, but he was definitely not. I say that because like he has lived and breathed Marines. It's short Indian dude, and anyway, in the motor T thing. But of the officers, 2 out of the 4, 3 of the 4. Now I think about it, almost. I'll say at least half. Cope wise, like there's varying degrees of success with that. I'll say at some point in time, every single one of us had some type of breakdown or break-in relationship type thing, and it's normalized, or it's not, shouldn't be. Like there's a variety of go see chaps or the chaplain, or there's 1,000 different resources, but there's no time, and even if there is time, like what it takes to sit down and like digest and implement that usually takes time and maturity level above what all of us have, and so it just there's just stuff to do, even with like baby stuff. Like, so one of the things that definitely bad choice, but I might have went to one ultrasound for Skylar, one doctor's, maybe 2 doctor's appointments at best, and that's just because from getting on the weekdays, I was trying to save up leave so that way I should have found. I don't know. It's not that wasn't good.
But you recognize it now. I mean, it seems like it was a lot going on.
If I left that office and Lieutenant Breslin had interaction with Colonel Kenny, that could lead to catastrophic failure. Lieutenant Yatta or Captain McNamara or any Marine, like, so I couldn't do it, and the other ones didn't either. So so there's that part.
And then did you deploy again?
Yes. So I guess getting on choices theme is, I think Skylar was supposed to be born like the 3rd week of October, and our deployment date was October 14th. And the sergeant major took, it was everybody knew that I was under pretty much intense stress, and not that I didn't ask at all, but sergeant major came up and he's like, hey, him and the XL was like, if you need to stay, do it. And I could have said yes and went later. I knew that privilege would never be granted to any enlisted Marine under almost any circumstance. And I probably at some point had denied my own. I know Sergeant Khan, one of them, he had the same. And then I just didn't feel right for the same reason I had to. I don't know. It just wasn't right. And so I said no, I'll go. And then Sky was born like 4 days later. I was eating. I actually have not the video of the actual thing happening, but like I was eating in Kuwait at the chow hall, and I forget even how I found out, but I ended up getting like a Wi-Fi call. She said, "Hey, I think Skylar's coming. On my way, Raiders. My dog's named Raider. She ended up taking Raider to a friend's house, taking Jet to the babysitter's house, and then she's like, she drove herself to the hospital because nobody is there either. So,
Oh, gosh.
so I'm on Skype, and my signal's bad, so I can't see her face. So it's just like the blue button. So I'm just sitting in my room, and this is something like nobody gives you a manual for. Like, what do you do? So I'm hearing, doctors coming in and everything. And so the last experience was almost damn death. Like, so for multiple people and such, so I'm like, good God, like, I don't know. I listened all the way through, and I can hear, Skylar cry and stuff, and I have it recorded still, which is crazy. But the one thing you don't get, what do you do after that? Like, what do you do? Like, good job. You know what I'm saying? Like from your Skype, but like, so you don't.
What a loss.
How long do you stay on? Her parents aren't there, and or nobody's there, and she's have to stay, and so you don't know how the kid, like, you can't. Eventually, you have to go back to work. I don't know how long I stayed, but I do know, like, a theme went back, and I'm sure that they flew in the next day, or who knows what. But luckily, she's healthy and no issues that I know of, from at least a life standpoint. Body-wise, I'm not going to pretend to know what that does to you. But the thing that changed, though, with this deployment, and when I got to, we now have a different president in place, being President Trump. And at this point in time, ISIS is a well-established threat. Syria is in a complete civil war. The situation in Iraq is degrading. And the intent on this deployment is still have your crisis response unit at this point now, whereas there's 2 locations in Iraq before, there's maybe 10 to 12, and then we also now are in Afghanistan again as a unit. And so we end up. So part of my main responsibility was, I think it was like 875 or so. Every single one of those Marines on every single flight that gets over there with all their stuff is 100% accountable. That's the first time I've had to do that part of it. So random situations like, hey, plane broke down in Ireland, we're stuck with this company, that random stuff. But now they're not all just going to Kuwait. And so the battalion, you have 24 different locations that you have to follow on and get them to teams of ranging from 120 to 4. You know what I'm saying? And so that's another level of support in the 4 different countries, if you include Jordan, 5 if you talk about Oman. So that's really, that was happening and happened successfully, and we got there. So I was like, all right, so it's one reason not to get fired, cleared, like hurdle there. The breathing period in between listening to baby, having that getting done, and here is there's Trump had tweeted something about a red line being crossed.
When was this? Do you remember about?
This was time? So Skylar was born October 19th. This had to be, I want to say it's 4 days later, 4 to 5 days later, and we had been like, presidents say things and such, and he says things all the time, but within 24 hours he ended up getting a message. It's called like an AMHS message. I think it's an RFF message. It's like request for forces, and one of the forces that was requested to go to Iraq to support a mission called Task Force Lion, which is basically a unit put together to remove ISIS from the Middle Euphrates River Valley, and then eventually into Syria. And that ended up coming to us, and so like, oh, like this is real. Like I hadn't, even though I deployed the first time, I was in Kuwait. So this time I'm there, and we have a meeting. All the staff officers, there's still dramas and such going on, but all of us there, we have a meeting, and we talk about what our support is going to look like to put together. Now, this is a dream for an infantry officer to go into period and then actually in pursuit of enemy with in intent for conflict there. For me, you know, it's kind of strange to get this message to do something with no planes, no trucks. We're in Kuwait. We don't have any of the things required. So you don't want to be like the guy that says no. So like another day, I thought this is. So we end up in the days coming. We had to have a follow-on meeting, and I'm supposed to have like the brief for like how we do this. And I knew I was gonna get fired. I've been used to this at this point in time, but I titled it the. So COA stands for like course of action, and it was titled the Hope COA. So everything that I'm saying is relying on hopes. No, this is just hopes and dreams. I can't. There's no way we could. I didn't say there's no way, but like because we didn't really have anything. So
did you not have access to assets for combat?
So the Marines did not have trucks in Iraq that they could use. We didn't have the 22s are notorious for breaking down C-130 availability, troop transport, like ability to feed ourselves, maintain anything. So the what ended up happening is this was a coalition unit. So we ended up physically going to Al-Assad Air Base, staging there for a couple of days as they figured out what the mission would be. For me, what that meant is talking to Army unit that was with the French, the other Marine unit that was there, and the Danish and the British to like put together things to get us to the field. Or not the field. See, it's not training. They corrupted us to make it think it's the field. But to get to somewhere off in the desert.
And what about the Marines? Were they already there?
They were coming in as this is going on.
Okay,
so
all this is happening.
Yep. So largely me and Lieutenant Breslin at the time, and so this is and long story short, happened. We got a good amount of stuff, and for me, one of the kind of surreal. Like I haven't not been in a firefight or received. Well, two things happened that kind of hit reality. One, we were told three things. We wouldn't have access to communication like for a month, at least. So what that meant is, Ricky now with the two kids, like I've called him like, hey, this crazy things happened. I'm not gonna be able to talk to you for like a month and a half.
Were you staying in Kuwait all this time?
No, now I'm in Iraq.
Okay, so you're now in Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what you need to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so now.
Okay.
Yeah, so
you're now in Iraq.
Now I'm in Iraq at Al-Assad, and I have to tell her that. And I wish I could tell you. I remember how that went. I'm sure it's not great. She probably didn't even have the energy to tell me that sucks at the time. It's probably just normalized. But like, so I told her that. Then one of the days we're in the command operations center, and we're in there with the British. So it's like half British run, half Marines. And it's the first time I hear, incoming, and I'm like, it can't be. And then the siren goes off, and it's, incoming mortar rounds, and like, I know I ended up like under a desk, but in that, time slowing down, I was like, this is my time, it's my time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh my gosh.
I don't know what you do. Like, but there's a British sergeant, because a British sergeant made, and this is where, you got like your Marines that have been through combat, and like you got kind of us as first generation, the next generation of it. British guys are in all their stuff, and like he's got experience. So he literally like snatches. He's like fighting like us because he's mad because we don't have any of our stuff on. And this is a lesson you only should learn like once, and he did. But even that became normalized after a period of time. And then I'll say the next time where for me it became real is when Al-Assad is in Anbar province, and it's a pretty large area in western Iraq, and we are going to drive to about 300 miles towards the Syrian border, and then another part of the unit was going to be literally on the border, and then eventually end up having units inside of Syria. But after giving the brief, the convoy brief, for me, it was the first time I had gone condition 1, per se. So like I had always had like my rifle and pistol with me, but I had never left the wire before. And so as we're driving through this town called like Al Baghdadi, and this, the kids are playing, and all the things that you've seen, heard, think of, I'm sitting here like, man, like what am I actually gonna do, with this? And like, and
wow.
it was just, you got the gunner up there, and it nothing never took anything. At least we didn't. But like, it just it's a confirmation. It's no different than getting put in the game. Like, it's nice to talk about it, practice and everything. But so that happened. Breeze through. We get to this area called Fami. We set up, and it's like, I would say real Marine stuff, like digging holes. There's nothing out there. I think ended up going 20 or so days, 28 or something, with like no shower, no communication. I'm writing letters. I always write letters, but it's like a lot of handwritten letters back. We're there with the French and the Army, and it's cool, but like it really made me think about, like, so the French has an artillery unit there, and we're close enough to where artillery, which means within 30 miles to be shooting out. The Army has their HIMARS, which is like the truck with the rockets that come out of them that can go a little bit further, and then a lot bit further we have helicopters coming in and out. There's drones, and like you can, and it's pretty intense environment. Me and the CO, things culminated to where we got in a fight there, because I was doing everything, because like I said, we had nothing, and just continuing to demand things that we thought that were in our possession, per se. All the communications were kind of jacked up because nobody really knew who was in charge half the time. But he had made a comment to like an Army sergeant about, like, I wish my forward could do whatever. I was like, I had taken offense to that at that point in time, and we had we didn't throw hands or anything, but pretty intense discussion, and I actually ended up leaving for like a day, just because.
To cool down?
Yeah. The operations officer, he ended up, before that, we had lost somebody had lost a mortar round, and found out at nighttime, and so we ended up getting a tent where we all slept in, like all the officers. So he wakes us all up and tells us to go find it. So we're in the desert looking for a dark object in the dirt, walking around, and we had so there was a lot of hateful intent.
So was it? This is off, but the temperature?
It's cold, so it's
okay.
wintertime. So this is Thanksgiving-ish time. So it was freezing cold, because again, the Marines, you have to shave, and like scraping off your face. We don't have any water or hot anything, so yeah, it was really cold. And the cool part, I guess, if I could ever find it, we had like this rock that we all sat around and ate and bitched about things. But either way, it ended up. From a mission standpoint, it was exactly what, again, we're supposed to do, train to do.
All your training came together.
Yeah, and it was awesome to be a part of that, and just to see. It's just always amazing when Marines can do almost little to no instruction, and so you still get. I don't ask a lot of questions. Like, one of the, I guess, I don't know if it's funny or not, but one morning I got a phone call from Lieutenant Breslin, who was back in Al Assad, and he's like, "Hey, what do you do about like the truck that rolled over with like the Marines and stuff in it yesterday?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You had a truck roll over." I was like, "What?" It's like, so Sergeant Khan, who now I think Staff Sergeant Khan, who's driving the truck, he is riding in the truck. The first one I found, I was like, "This is gonna be a crazy question, man." But like, did you roll over like the truck, like a whole bunch of Marines like the other day? He's like, "Oh yeah, sir, we did." I was like, "What happened?" He's like, "Oh, we got it over." Like he's just Florida kid. Like, it was just things like that now seem normal, that aren't really. But either way, I ended up out there for about a month, and the other people out there were actually the Iraqi forces, some of which maybe your friends may not be, who knows, but for that, ended up there for about a month and a half, and I ended up going back to Kuwait. We had a company stay out in Syria actually, and that it's declassified stuff now. It's like news, but like we were close enough, even when I was there, where you could hear like Russians on the radio. So when I say Syria, this is like the Russian forces that weren't Russian forces that were with the Kurdish forces, because we were allied with the Syrian Defense Forces, and it was insanity from a who is who, what are we doing standpoint type stuff. They ended up getting in a significant firefight where I think like almost 300 Russians, well not Russians, 300 people that were in the desert got killed. We had we actually had one Marine get shot by an SDF force and like green on green stuff. But either way, there's that part of it.
What was the mission? What was that referred to? What mission was that that period of time of conflict?
So that was between October and December. We have been a part of Task Force Lion, and all wrapped in Operation Inherent Resolve. This was having a brain fart, but the most multinational coalition mission to eliminate ISIS. Now, it seemed to be strategically placing yourself around certain oil fields, but that's a whole nother. It's another deal.
For another interview,
But I ended up going back, and actually, when I got back, at this point in time, we had all been out with pretty intense time with various levels of stress, and I ended up getting to go to Major Rosales, who also, again, is in the string of leaders who saved my life for myself. Ended up getting to go to Jordan to help organize, set up some training stuff. Realistically, is just to get me away.
Was it R&R type of, or just to change the environment?
Yeah, I gotta think a statute of limitations on. It was a change of environment that was welcomed by myself. It happened to be like the other three probably most stressed captains in the unit, and it was a good time. So I'll check what the statute is on that, but I got to go to Petra, got to go to Amman, the Dead Sea, like all that stuff, and then just a good time before coming back to reality. So, and the other thing that had happened while we were in the desert, I had to decide if I was going to stay in the Marine Corps or not. So like while we were doing for the Marines, after a certain amount of days, but it ends up being about 4 to 5 years. You go on a board and they decide whether it's called a career designation board, and they either say, hey, you can stay in for as long as you want, or get out there, give your service. They told me I could stay in, so I got career designated. Then they give you a month to decide if you accept or if you're just gonna get out. And so there's no communication. There's I can't talk to Ricky thing, and then there's this situation. I'm trying to remove myself mentally from what the present is, and decide what I want to do future-wise with that. And decided to get out on the last day, probably like the 31st day, and mostly because I think, and you can never know, but I think I'd experienced everything I wanted to, and just family-wise, I just couldn't. It was just a lot for me, and so ended up decided to do that. So now coming back, we're leading to getting out of deployment. Working on redeploy. We're still doing the regular operation stuff. the only hiccup to getting everybody back was there's another tweak situation, and so somebody had to go back to Syria, and they told us this is like 2 days before, not 2 days, like maybe like 2 weeks before we're supposed to redeploy. Decide that at least 200 people are probably gonna have to stay, and at this point in time, I was seeing daughter. I had tickets to Kentucky Derby, and I just had enough of life. And so I can't that was the company did end up staying. I ended up going back with the majority of the battalion. Then everybody ended up getting back safely. And there's 3 things I got when I got back. One, shortly before I left, I had been investigated for fraud, waste, and abuse, and theft of equipment for something that had happened in the rear. So there's a quad con full of old weapons that hadn't gotten taken care of, and there's a new commander that came on board. He wanted to make an example of somebody, so it's 2-7. So of course, so there was that. So that's the first time I got to meet that commander. I was like, yes, I was the person that you investigated. Wrongfully, but we'll just leave that alone. CEO actually stood up for me on that one. So I gotta give him that. But then I got an award, which was cool. And then
Is that the Commendation Award?
it is. So that was the second one I had gotten while with the regiment, and yeah. So and that's. It's now in retro, one, I don't have any pictures like most people think I know in the military. 2, from an experience and ceremony standpoint, again, because we depreciate what we do, it's just us just hanging out in beers, all right, here's the award thing, blah blah blah. I should have had family, all that stuff.
Hold that up, just hold it up just so I can see it, so we get it in there. Yeah. Okay. So that's the award you got, but it's because you're out, you just didn't make a big deal over it.
Well, I was in 29. My only intent was to get to Vegas, at the time. Anything I was doing, I was done playing those games.
Your mind was already out.
Yeah.
You want to go home.
And then the third thing I got, so I ended up cycling out as soon as possible. Cycled all of us out of the battalion, minus me and a couple other people. Ended up getting a new executive officer as my reporting officer. Immediately proceeded to fire everybody that I was working with slowly until it got to myself. Gave me a nice little letter of reprimand with that. Fired me, got sent back to the regiment to just be in purgatory until I got out of the unit, which typically happens anyway. So it was from a ceremonious exit. There was none. You just not there one day. I took
you don't have there's not a transitional preparing you for what are you going to do next, or
there's it's called TRS, transition readiness. So at this point in time, I am convinced that I'm going to be a football coach as well, and so of the resources that could have used it, none of those are oriented towards doing that. And I had actually spent all of my leave time in Vegas working with UNLV. So I was working full time with UNLV and full time on active duty as well. And again, I would advise anybody listening, take a tactical pause and be with your family, before going to an equally as intense job where everybody's getting fired. But did not. And I don't know about decision making with that, so when I went through TRS, and I was kind of, typically if you're leaving or getting out, there'll be a meeting, and during some period of the month they go through everybody, they say nice things about you, whatever. But I was kind of unitless, and so I just didn't. Just was out one day.
It sounds like you just had an abrupt end to your whole Marine. You probably didn't have time to think about it, but I know you just felt you had to make the decision to get back to family.
Yeah.
And then you had a coaching job waiting.
Yeah, and I went, from an advisability standpoint, I ended up going directly to Kentucky for the coaching job after that. From I think the entire time that I was in 29 Palms, my family, nobody, I shouldn't say Ricky came twice in those 4 years, I want to say. And again, that's more of a function of I just never wanted to add one more minute of pack up kids, go to cars, do self thing, and so I just been in the habit of nobody coming anyway, and I think it's selfish, I guess, I don't know, but yeah, I mean it was not. It sucked being like alone and capable in that scene, everything, and just going to just not like it's not like there's no purpose, I guess. You
mean from how you had all that intensity with your job and your responsibilities and where you were working for the Marines? Well, I mean, and it's still recent. I mean, it's only 2019, so it's still fairly.
Oh, I guess I meant while I was in like that terminal period when you're detached from a unit, like you can like literally if I just didn't show up, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's a weird. So it's just a weird thing. It's like I don't know. Maybe if there's more certainty that comes with what you're doing next, which I had almost none. I knew what was coming up next for me was not. I wasn't gonna be making any money. It was high risk, and it was I hadn't been we had never lived together.
Wow.
We had never at that point in time. It was 5 years. We had never lived in the same house for longer than a week and a half, maybe at best. Never been a Monday through Sunday parent. Like I'd going into coaching, I was really doing the same thing, but I always had some type of like, and that's what got me with getting out is realize that you can't build what you can't replicate what you go through with other Marines, even because there shouldn't be at least, but there's no stratifying like rank experience who you are. Like when if you go be a football coach, for example, and you say I love my athletes. Like, do you like what if your 19-year-old defensive tackle has a baby by his 18-year-old girlfriend? Like, what are you doing? Are you at the hospital? Like, what are you doing? Like, how you if XYZ's overweight, there's no cutting Marines. Like, if you get a Marine that's sucks, like there shouldn't be. Like, there's some that but for the most part, if you don't have the option of recruiting another Marine or just hoping you can check the inbound roster, like you have to fix that. Or you have to articulate that it can't be fixed and know that what your role was.
Is that a mentality of the Marines?
It has to, because you can't have a weak link out there. Like you're endangering your own.
Good. That's good. I can understand that.
So it's in order not to endanger others or yourself, you have to make sure that they are competent. And like I try to lead people towards figuring it out themselves versus like direct. One of the reasons I was always ranked like either at the highest or the lowest is because pretty even keels. I'm not rah-rah or like no. I know a lot of history more than most, but I just I don't put a lot of stock into that. I don't put a lot of stock into like who has the biggest sticker, who can do whatever. It's what have you actually done for others or Marines or and it doesn't have to be an everyday thing. And all the good leaders I had never told me. Like I just found it in myself. Like like this is why they did that extra hour of pain when they have their own families.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a good. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah, and so it's hard to find like outside of that. I would say. Now that I'm in true civilian world, it's not existent. So
Are you so I mean, I know we need to, for now, like just wrap this up. We can always do more, but are you past the point of would you be able to go back in the Marines?
I'm not yet.
Have you ever thought about it?
I have either active or reserve or being a firefighter, which I kind of put in the same box. And I would be doing it because that's what I would be looking for as far as the culture, the group, the trust. The experience is positive and negative. But I owe other people, I owe her, I owe my kids an opportunity to have that same
That makes sense.
thing as well.
Yeah.
And I can't act like there wasn't a lot of negative, like there's a lot of one tangible time. You can't replace it. Like you can't be there. Like you can't. And this isn't even as like adults and stuff. And I would see it with the jet. Like, you know, when you pick him up from daycare and he's crying because he doesn't know who you are. Like you can't. That stuff matters. I can't even imagine what would happen now if I was gone. I respect people that can do it. Like I don't know how to tell Scott. Well, I have Miss Scott for like that's a whole nother. It hurts me more to do that than to go find. It would hurt me, and I'm putting this on kids. But at the end of the day, that's cover up for the fact that it hurt me now to say I'm leaving.
You don't want to miss any more time with them.
No, and frankly, and I understand the ebbs and flows of politics and geopolitical diplomacy and such, but I don't have. I have to have some faith in kind of the mission that we're doing, and that was never defined for us when we were there. Like there's never, all right, for me, like my mom's side of the family is like from Liberia in Africa, and it's not too far away from Nigeria where Boko Haram is doing the same thing. Like so why and I. As most people mature, and as I do, I start thinking about all that, and like, are there other ways other than hiding under a desk because you heard, incoming to contribute to the larger problem? There's a period in life for, carrying around rifles. There's a period of life for writing. There's a period of life for speaking. There's a period of life for empowering others by teaching. And
Good perspective.
I think mine is one of the others now. I don't know which one yet, all three, but.
Are you in touch with any of just to wrap it up, so it sounds like, because there's a continuing story.
Yeah.
We need to hopefully at some point give you some time to get this next period out of your, see where things are going. But are you in touch with any of the people that you mentioned that were great leaders to you during during your period of active service?
Yeah, not as much as sucks. And I spent a lot of time this week thinking about that, just because one, like Major Flambert went off with like the French Foreign Legion. For who knows? He's like I said, he's a Renaissance man. Then Major Rosales is with England, and then of the ones that got out and kind of separated a bit, but I think that's a negative impact on all of my, because the intensity of time means that we don't get together as much as we haven't got together at all. In fact, I just got a plane ticket yesterday to go meet with two of the lieutenants that I'd worked with. Well, they're not captains. One's still in actually, and but the only reason why is because one of the other lieutenants he has hopefully not terminal but really late stage cancer, and he's 31 with three kids under 5, and just found out last week. So it's no, that's sorry, I didn't need to go to. That was tough last week, but there's a catalyst to actually talk about that with the other ones and try to do better. Like the other one's in medical school right now. One's still active. The other one has 2 kids. So we're all kind of in that phase too. We're already isolated because having middle age, I guess, with kids, but it's got to do better with that.
Well, I mean, you don't have to do it all right away.
Yeah.
It's just having that intention and
Yeah.
kind of going for there. But I mean, you gave a really. It's the first time I've heard like the details on for you being in logistics and then the type of things you're handling and from a distance. You just don't think of that. You know, the people that are actually on the ground, you know, receiving and active, that's one thing, but then everything has to get to them.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and with technology, you always just, there'd be time I literally call Raytheon in like Virginia to be like, can you,
That's amazing.
yeah, so,
it's pretty amazing.
but anyway, I appreciate your time. I know it's
Yeah,
going
no,
by super
well,
excessive.
I mean, there's so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I still, like I said, we'll keep things in your records, but no, I find it intriguing and trying to follow it, but it does help put in perspective how so many things are going on, and you're making a decision. But you're here now. You're in Atlanta, Georgia, and I want to wish you the best with what's the coming months, coming year, where you go. But and again, we've met through. I can mention it that we've met through. Originally at the Emerging Vets and Players, one of the meetings, and went to the film last night with a lot of other vets, and those are all ongoing activities, and it's nothing that everyone's kind of in the same situation at different stages, but you're staying connected. So it sounds like just an observation or from listening is, like you said, there's other ways instead of carrying a rifle, or that you're going to do your life mission. Your service is continuing, and that's in itself. It's not easy in civilian. It's never easy out of the military, but then being in some, especially like the Marines that are the smallest branch, unique, very tight. There's just once a Marine, always a Marine, and so there's a lot left for you to discover and to do and to put to use the incredible training that you got, the preparation that you now realize at the time, because you were thrown into some really intense demands, but the people that were above you know what to look for, and they saw it in you. So you were groomed, and now it's time. Now you're in this next phase. So it's an honor for me to be sitting here talking with you. So Sherman, thank you for making the time, and we'll put this, this small piece of a very big picture together and share it, and we'll stay in touch.
No problem.
All right. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.